Hey guys, it's Bailey. Welcome back to the channel and thanks for tuning in to what's going to be a dive into Looxi Beauty. You guys have been recommending this brand to me for a while, and so I finally placed an order with them, getting one of just about every sort of product and finish from the website. So I want to dive into it today, reviewing them, swatching them, and then also showing you how to get the look that I'm wearing today, which is not just the eyeshadows but also the highlight as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So first I want to talk about the shopping and shipping experience. So I purchased these towards the end of January. Actually, I can tell you exactly. I bought them on January 30th. I got free shipping because you get free shipping for orders over $40 plus domestically here in the US. And so I didn't pay for any expedited shipping and it was delivered by February 4th. So I think that's a pretty great turnaround time. The shopping experience overall was really nice. The website's easy to navigate and shipping was obviously pretty quick. For now, I think you can only purchase these on the Looxi Beauty website. So unfortunately, no way to see or swatch these in person before you buy. But overall, it was an easy experience and one I would totally recommend if you're interested in purchasing. So now let's jump into the shadows. There are 4 finishes available within the Looxi Beauty collection. There are metals, auroras, mattes, and shimmers. And I have shades from the metals, auroras, and mattes collection, but since I have purchased these, the shimmers collection has launched. So unfortunately, I can't speak to that texture and how it performs, but I have just about every other one covered. So let's talk about the auroras first. To be totally honest, there isn't a description for what makes an aurora different from a metal or a shimmer. To be totally honest, I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between an aurora finish versus a metal finish versus a shimmer finish. At first I thought the auroras were going to be exclusively duochromatic, but I actually have a metal shadow that I thought was an aurora because it's a duochrome, but it is obviously a metal. So there is no description on the website for what differentiates those finishes, but I'm just going to go through them as they are categorized on the website. So the first aurora shade I want to talk about is Mirage. This is described as a peach pink with a dynamic shift to gold, and I would say it leans on the sheer side of things. This is definitely something or a shade that I like to wear if I'm not going for a sheer wash of beautiful shimmery color across the lid. It's definitely multifaceted because it has those duochromatic characteristics to it, but if I want something a little bit more, this is a really good one to wear over deeper shadows for an even more intense shift. Then I have the shade Glazed and Confused, and this is described as a shadow that shifts from green to silver to pink, which sounds really extreme in a description, but is honestly super, super subtle. I think the green in here is very minimal. If anything, this comes off to me as more of a light frosty shade with a stronger pink shift and a super, super subtle green tinge to it, depending on how you look at it. Then last up is the shade Genesis, and this has the strongest shift to me of all of the Aurora finishes that I have. This is described as a blue-gray shadow that shifts to purple and pink, and I would say it does just that. And granted, they are pastel-y shades and it's a softer sort of transition, but it definitely, depending on the lighting you're in, has a much stronger shift than either of the 2 other shades that I've shown have. Next are the metal shades, and this first one is called Foxy Lady, and this is actually the one that kind of made me second guess the difference between a metal versus an aurora, because Foxy Lady is a light lavender with shifts of gold and silver. So you still get that duochromatic effect, and the texture itself reminds me a lot of Genesis, so I don't know that the ingredients are all that different. Like, all of these have been very smooth, not at all gritty feeling, even though they have shimmers and glitters in them. They don't feel like crumbly or gritty to the touch. They're all very smooth, feel very creamy and satiny. So again, I'm not quite sure what the difference is between the 2 finishes, but really love the shade Foxy Lady. And then the other metal shade that I have is called Laced. And this is described as a light pink with silver undertones. And I find that on me, the silver undertones really come out more. It's what you'll see in the demo later in this video. It's what I'm wearing on basically the inner half of my corner, and more often than not when I wear this, the silver really pops over the light pinky rose gold shade to this. Last up for shadows is the shade Juice, and this actually isn't categorized under any of the finishes on the website. I didn't have trouble finding it the first time around when I bought this, but since going back and trying to find the actual shadow on the website to see the description, how they describe the shades, I couldn't find it through searching on the website. I googled it and then was led directly to the page, and it's uncategorized, so it's still available. You do have to Google search it basically to get to the page, but it looks like you can purchase it from the page. And it is this gorgeous chocolate brown base, but with a gold and pink and greeny shift to it. Like, this is one of the most multifaceted shades I've seen from this collection. Absolutely gorgeous. It's not total, I mean, you really have to build it to get the opacity, because once it's on, it kind of loses that deep chocolate brown to it and comes off as more of an iridescent purpley antique gold, which is still very pretty, but I wouldn't kind of bank on this as like an outer corner, really dramatic depth shade. It's more of a really interesting single color across the lid, or like just general lid shade, because it doesn't get quite deep enough for me once it's blended out to be an inner corner depth shade. And that also reminds me of another shade that I don't think is available at all, because once again, I couldn't find it just while navigating the website, and then it totally came up as a 404 when I tried Googling it, like I did the shade Juice, and that is 79. It is such a bummer that this is apparently no longer available, because it is this incredibly high shine, like liquid metal formula that is in a cool bronze shade. Sometimes with bronzes it gets a little bit too warm and coppery, and although I love those, they don't always flatter my coloring, and so this was just one of those where it's such an easy but still very dramatic high shine bronze to throw on the lids. But to my knowledge, it's not available, and I don't know if it's coming back. So that's it for all of the shimmery shades. Now let's get into the mattes, which I don't think I mentioned this before. Across the board, all of the eyeshadows are $5, which I think is pretty reasonable for a single pan eyeshadow. But back to the mattes. So the first shade I want to talk about is Moss. It's this really beautiful muted hunter green shade. Then I have the shade Caramel, which is unlike any other caramel that I feel like I've seen from other brands, because it has a gragey component to it. Like, it's not a rich caramel or even a light caramel like I feel like most other brands put out when they name it caramel. This has a lot more depth and richness, and like I said, is almost a cooler as opposed to a warmer caramel. Then my favorite, actually not my favorite, my tied for favorite matte shadow from this brand is the shade Chicory. And this in the pan just doesn't do it justice. I was so impressed when I actually went on to apply this to my lid and found that it transforms from what looks like a slightly purpley red leaning deep chestnut brown to a full-on maroon feeling deep rich brown across the lid. It just really retains those red components without being too red. I think a lot of people shy away from red because it can make you look sick, but this just pulls the red right out when you apply it, but still maintains that beautiful depth and richness that you see in the pan. And then the last shade, my other favorite, because I just don't know that I've seen a shade quite like this before, is this olive called Socialite. And I like it because compared to something like a Moss, it leans more brown, but worn alone, it definitely has that strong green component that makes it like an olivey kind of green. It's just very unique. I haven't seen a shade quite like this out there before, and so I was happy to add it to my collection. And across the board, I feel like these mattes are really unique. The one thing I was nervous though when I first swatched these, they are a little dry, and when I think you'll be able to see this in the swatches, they don't perform all that well when swatching. These are one of those classic examples of how you can't necessarily always trust swatches because they could perform totally differently on the eyes. That has totally been my experience with these formulas, because they feel kind of dry. It feels like you might have to dip your finger in a couple of times to get the kind of pigment you're after and that you see in the pan. But when you actually use a brush, these so easily build up to be something really pigmented and rich on the eyelid. So definitely don't be deterred by the swatches that you see here. Wait until the tutorial at the end, because I think they just perform so well when you're actually using them in an eye look. Okay, now let's talk about the highlighters. If you are into colorful highlighters, this is absolutely a brand to get to know. So their highlighters come in these larger pans. They are 37mm pans, and they all retail for $7.50. I picked up 3 different highlighters. This one that I'm holding right now is the shade Wicked, and it's described as an icy blue highlighter with an intense violet shift. Next up is Voodoo, and this is described as an iridescent green highlight. Next up is Voodoo, and this has an icy base with an iridescent green highlight shift to it. And then last shade is Charmed, which is actually more like a quad chrome because depending on the lighting, the angle, you get it. It goes from like a pink to purple to blue to green. It is so multifaceted and such a fun highlighter to layer with. And in case you're unfamiliar with how I like to wear colorful highlighters to make them a little bit less intimidating, I put it right, and you can, I mean, it's such a big shift. You'd never know if I'm just looking straight at the camera that I'm wearing it now until I turn my head, and it just adds that little bit of extra interest right there. But basically what I do, and what I've done today with the shade Wicked, is that I just take a small highlighter brush. This one is from Wet n Wild. It's the P75. Take a light hand, well, as heavy a hand as you want. I went pretty heavy with it today. And I just start right in my outer corner and start buffing and blending it out from there. That way I find I don't feel like I have a big colorful streak down the tops of my cheeks, which feels a little more unnatural than what I am personally comfortable with feeling throughout the day. And instead almost looks like an extension of my eyeshadow up here and just gives, like I said, that just depth and dimension to your average highlight look that, you know, your everyday champagne golden sort of highlighter doesn't give you. And if you want to tone it down a little bit, totally add that champagne or gold, like your everyday highlighter, add it on top of here. I did with mine. I actually used my Dior Show or Glow highlighter on this as well to kind of bring it further down the tops of my cheekbones. But I just love how interesting that makes the rest of the look. Granted, it doesn't tie in. I didn't necessarily buy shades, highlight shades that coordinated with the eyeshadow shades that I had, because this is very blue versus very like, you know, greeny maroon up here, but I still really like it. So as far as a review goes, I have nothing bad to say about any of these products. I've been really impressed with my experience with Looxi Beauty, and just recommend you check them out in general if you want some really interesting and different color combinations and finishes when it comes to eyeshadows. You know, there's nothing new about a matte, but like I said, I feel like I chose some shades that really stunned me in terms of how they look in the pan versus how they translate to the eye, and I just feel like it's very unique to this brand. And the same, of course, can be said for the other shadow combinations in here that have those funky, you know, quad chrome shifts to them. It's just a really fun way to change up your makeup look if you're just looking to add a little something different to your collection. Definitely check these out. Now let's talk about what's on my eyes today and how I created this look. So first off, I started with that olive green shade Socialite, and I took a Morphe M513 brush, dipped it in there, and just went in through that in pretty broad strokes in my crease area. Took it up pretty high. This is like my best friend blending color in this look. Not only concentrated it in the crease, but also took it a good part of the way up to my brow bone, because then I went in with that shade Moss, that more true greeny shade, and I really concentrated that in the deeper part of my crease or socket, still using that same brush. Now, and this is where I hope you'll be able to see that kind of red plummy shift that made me fall in love with the shade Chicory, but I took a City Color Cosmetics brush. This is a CCB 101 brush, and I just took a few taps in there. A ton of pigment comes off on these, so be sure and tap it off if you've already applied your foundation and don't want fallout. But I just patted that starting in my outer corner and patted that all the way in about until the inner third. Just making sure it was nice and deep and pigmented in my outer corner and blending it out nicely across the rest of my lid. Then I used my brush cleaner to clean that same City Color brush so that I could go into the shade Laced, pat that in there, and start in my inner corner and work that towards about the outer third. So there's like that overlap between Chicory and Laced is basically like the broadest part of my lid. Then to make sure that Chicory was still well built up in my outer corner, I would kind of go back and forth, layering it up each way and blending the two together. Then in my very inner corner, I went in with the shade Glazed and Confused. Again, same City Colors brush, just patted that right in the inner corner because it adds sort of a brighter, frostier glow than the shade Laced was giving me across the lid. But that's pretty much it. That's all I did to get this eye look. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you tried Looxi, what are your favorite shades, because the shade range is extensive from this brand. Like, it was hard to just pick these. I could totally see myself placing another order to get an entirely new mix of shadows. So let me know what your favorite shades are, or if you're picking some up for the first time, let us know what you're picking up down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye guys!